That seat of science, Athens, and earth's proud mistress Rome, where now are all their glories, we scarce can find a tomb. Then guard your rights, Americans.
Hi everybody, I'm the Surface Nerd, and today we are continuing my Texas Revolution 190th special, where we are going over impressions of the Texas Revolution. Today we're doing the most iconic battle of the Texas Revolution, the Alamo, the Siege of the Alamo. Quick warning, if you hear any thunder or lightning in the background, that's because there's a giant storm to the north. And I do mean giant. I'll pull up the photo I took of it. Oh, maybe we'll see. And then also, if you hear wind, there is a lot of wind going around right now, although I'm trying to beat the spot where there's not much wind. But this is an impression I'm pretty excited for. I did not have everything I wanted to have for this. I did forget some stuff at work because I now work at a museum that does Texas Rev era and stuff like that. So I forgot some things, but that's okay because I've got the general stuff. So anyways, let's get into it. So for this impression, I have my linen shirt. I do have a cotton shirt I'm making at the moment, which I would rather have used for this, as this is a very nice shirt, and I want to keep it that way. And right at the moment, I'm making myself some not so nice shirts, so I can have more like work shirts and stuff like that. Stuff I'm not afraid to get dirty, because you can see the collar's gotten very dirty, even after being washed multiple times. So it's just a matter of, I want to keep this for like nice occasions, because it's a very nice shirt. But this is an 1820 style shirt with the one button securing the collar and the big bosom slit. We've got the cotton trousers. These are made out of cotton duck, which is a very thick material. It's used to make tent cloths and all that. These have lasted me a very long time, and I don't know how much longer they're going to last me. They've worn out in a couple places already, and I'm really trying to keep them going. But they're nice and used and dirty. Even after washing, they've still got a bit of dirt on them, but they look great. And then go with my little white suit I got going on here. We got my brogans, or these are supposed to be like civilian shoes. These are South Union Mills federal issue shoes. So technically they're union, but the shoe design was pretty much the exact same for civilians. The only difference for this time period is it should have a rounded front, but there's no one that really makes good reproductions of rounded front shoes. Maybe Missouri Boot and Shoe makes some good ones. I am going to be buying some shoes from him eventually, so I'll have better brogans for this. Got my socks, which I do need to replace because I finally got a hole in one of them, and it just keeps getting bigger. But you have some period socks. I got my rosary, which I made myself. Designed it after some period Mexican ones for the time. They used clay beads, I used wooden beads. The beads themselves probably aren't that accurate. These are ones I just got at a hobby store, but overall I think it looks pretty good, and theoretically you could get beads made like this during the time period as well, or you can make ones like that. It wouldn't honestly be that difficult. I got a pocket knife, a little period-ish pocket knife. I would also have my wallet, but it's just a coin purse, but I also left that at work. So for the coat, we have what's called a roundabout. This is your typical coat for the time. This is like the t-shirt of the time in a way. Practically everyone was wearing them. That is just your typical garment. You could have tailcoat versions. This is a simple laborer's roundabout, so it's a simple construction made with simple materials. It's a light cotton. It's white, which is a cheap material to get, so that's why I have so much white. White, browns, and blues are your cheap materials. So I represent someone who's of poorer nature, so I have poorer clothes. Doesn't have tails, it's not that fancy, but it's a good looking coat, and they're not honestly that hard to make either. I should also mention that this being the Texan militia, in this case specifically, I'm representing a Tennessee volunteer, so someone who came from Tennessee to Texas to fight for the revolution. It was at the Alamo, which there was a lot of. They would have just been wearing civilian clothes. There were some uniformed units, which I have done videos on in the past. You should go look at them. I'll link them up below. And hopefully I can do a few videos, more deep dive videos on that in the future. Possibly, we'll see. I have my waistcoat, which is made up of a nice blue and red flannel, or not flannel, plaid, with a white backing. It's a very nice little waistcoat with bone buttons, which match my roundabout coat. So pretty simple buttons, nothing too fancy. The fanciest thing I have here is this hat. This is a very nice reproduction black top hat that my boss was so graciously kind enough to give to me. It is a very nice one. These things are very expensive today, just as they wouldn't have been as expensive back then, but they're still pretty complicated to make. But the top hat is the hat of the time. That's pretty much what everyone is wearing, or some version of the top hat. We call it a top hat today. They would have called it a round hat back then. But yeah, this was made out of a wool, so it's a cheaper material. Most of your higher end ones would have been made out of felt or beaver skin or something like that. Moving on to the equipment, it's a very simple equipment setup. I don't have my knapsack, no haversack, and no trump line or a bedroll, blanket roll, because we are defending a fort. It does not need to be complicated. Honestly, a lot of the guys who were defending the fort probably didn't have a canteen on them. They probably were in their garrison fit, which I will show off, which would be simply their belt and their cartridge box and a knife. Or bayonet if they had a bayonet. And that would have been your garrison kit. And that's probably what most of the guys at the Alamo were with. But they probably did arrive with canteens. And they probably still had their own personal canteen to draw water from and drink from. But they would also have their cups, which I'll get to in a bit. For this equipment set, I have a simple civilian leather belt, which I had help making, but it is all handmade. We have a handmade shop bag that is 50 years old now. Very old shop bag I got donated to me. Very kind of the man who donated it to me. He's mentored me into this. Very great man named Michael Moore. And we got a powder horn on it. It's got a antler antler patch knife on the back, and then I have a powder measure made out of cane pole or sugar cane, and then a vent pick made out of another piece of antler. And then for the canteen, I have a typical wooden canteen. This is kind of more like a military style in a way, but civilians could make it. This is also painted light blue like the military would have. But this you could have gotten your hands on as a civilian, either buying it from the surplus market if it was actually a U.S. canteen, or people could have been making these kinds of canteens and stuff like that. For personal items, there's not much because I did leave a lot of it back at work. But I have a tin cup made from hot dip tin. I've got a notepad or notebook, little diary thing, with a wooden pencil. I've got a wooden comb, and then I have a handmade New Testament Bible, which is a 1824 reprint, I believe. So it's pretty cool, and it is actually printed. Let's see, 1827 reprint, which is pretty cool. That was also made from the mentor, actually. And then last but not least, we have the rifle. This is my absolutely beautiful Tennessee long rifle, which you've seen in some other videos. Of course, being a Tennessee volunteer, or even a Texas resident from Tennessee, which is what I usually do, this is perfect, as this is your Tennessee style long rifle. There wasn't really that many differences between this, the Pennsylvania rifle, and some of the other long rifles you could have seen, but they did have their different styles. Can I tell you what makes this a Tennessee long rifle? Not really, but I know it is a Tennessee long rifle. A gunsmith made this for me, and he was so kind as to give me a pretty good deal on it. Oh, I forgot to take my knife. Call it a Bowie knife, or Bowie knife, not Bowie. Wait, yeah. I'll put up the, well, yeah, Bowie. It is a Bowie knife. Correct me. That is correct. Very nice knife, all handmade as well, and I bought this from a very nice man in our community. Oh, it sits like that, I'm stupid. Very cool knife, and a very, very cool sheath. Very well done. I'm very happy with it, and it's pretty dang cool to have. Knives were pretty common. If guys didn't have bayonets, they would typically carry either a knife or a hatchet on them. And knives were also just a pretty common thing out in the frontier in that area and in U.S. culture at this time. Anyways, back to the rifle. This is a very beautiful rifle. Got the tiger stripe pattern from, I believe it's the maple wood. Yes. Simple flintlock rifle. It is rifled. It's got your rear and front sights. This is a civilian rifle, and this is what most men were carrying in the Texas Revolution, were civilian weapons. Either, whether it be rifles, which would have been the most common, shotguns, like the dual barrel shotguns, and Fowlers, which, to my knowledge, were not that common. Rifles would have been probably the most common. There's a bit of a misconception, same with the American Revolution, that rifles are what won the war. That's not really true. The rifle did have a lot of advantages, but it also had a big disadvantage, and that was shooting a round ball. It is a lot harder to reload because the ball needs to be tight as it goes down the barrel. With a musket, it just slides right down with it being a smooth bore. So in the Texas Revolution, you did have many battles where the Texans inflicted much heavier casualties onto the Mexicans because they had rifles, but that was only because they were behind fortified positions. So the Alamo is a great example. I'll put up the tally of casualties up on the screen, and you'll see that it was pretty gruesome. Now, of course, the entire garrison was killed, so that's not a true fair comparison, and there was a good amount that did surrender, but even still, it is an astonishing ratio. Even battles at like the Battle of Concepcion, Battle of Colado Creek, and other battles like Gonzalo's, battles that happened before where the Texians were behind cover and able to take that time to reload without being shot by the quicker firing Mexican muskets, and were able to deal accurate long-range damage to the Mexican army. Or the grass fight is also a great example. But Colado Creek is a good example of what happens when they're caught out in the open. With the Texians out in the open, while they did repulse the Mexican advances, they did end up surrendering as they were not only heavily outnumbered, but outgunned. And they did suffer a fair amount of casualties from this. But they were also still behind fortified positions. If the Texians ever decided to do a line battle with the Mexican army and used riflemen as line infantry, like men with these rifles as line infantry, they would have simply been beat by the Mexican army because the Mexican army could have poured more lead downrange quicker and would have simply just done vastly more damage than the Texians with their rifles. But yeah, anyways, let's go learn some history and see what it looks like on it. Now, everybody knows the story of the Alamo and what happened there, but most people don't realize and know the story of what happened before to set up the Battle of the Alamo. So the battle that happened before was the Siege of Behar. This happened, it was a pretty long siege. It was from November to December of 1835. The Texians besieged the town of San Antonio, and through some pretty grueling urban combat, were able to capture the city and force General Cos and his army to retreat out of Texas beyond the Rio Grande. The Texians then took up position at the Alamo, which was an abandoned mission. Colonel Travis and Jim Bowie would be the commanders assigned there in early 1836. They would take over and start building up fortifications. General Sam Houston did order Bowie that he thought the Alamo should be destroyed, and if Bowie thought the Alamo was not a defensive position, he should destroy it also and then join with his army with Sam Houston. Now, I think the Battle of the Alamo should have happened, or it's good that it did happen. Should have happened? Probably not. The Alamo was not a very great defensive position. The walls were godly old. Even the built-up fortifications were very quickly built wooden palisades and wooden walls. And the Mexican siege artillery, which was on the way before the battle happened, would have easily knocked down the walls. And this was the advice that Santa Anna's officers gave to him. However, he came with a very large army of about 5,000 or so men and would besiege the Alamo. I think it was 18 days from late February to early March. Texas would declare its independence during the siege, and it wasn't very long after the siege that the Alamo did fall itself. But the news would take a while to get to Washington and Brazos. The Texians that were there were almost times not actually from Texas. Most of the men who volunteered from Texas, who made up a majority of the almost 1,000 man army that besieged San Antonio, most of them left back to their homes. One, because they believed that the war was over. They had kicked Mexico out of Goliad. They had kicked Mexico out of San Antonio. They thought the war was won. There was no more Mexican forces in Texas. And they went back home to go and tend to their farms and families. However, that was further from the truth. The Mexican army was coming. Santa Anna was building up an army and marched them through the very harsh winter, all the way from land through Mexico into Texas. And The men who did stay were men who really had nowhere else to go. These men were American volunteers. They had come and heard the news of the Texas Revolution and had come from all the different states of the United States to come and fight for this revolution, with land being promised to them if they stood throughout the rest of the war, and the war was won. So these men had nowhere else to go, and they decided to stay at the Alamo. This was about 200 men. 100 of them would be taken away for the Matamoros expedition, which would fail very miserably. The men that were there did a lot of things that Texian soldiers did, which was gambling and drinking. There were a couple members of the New Orleans Greys that were still there as well, and that's where their flag was captured at the Battle of the Alamo, and is still today in Mexico, above their congressional hall, or above the main seat at their congressional house. Of course, the Alamo would fall. All the men would die and surrender. Today, I'm representing a Tennessee volunteer, possibly one of the men that came with Davy Crockett. That, or really, since I'm dressed in summer gear and this battle happened in late winter, early spring, more likely one of the Gonzales 32, which were 32 men who came from Gonzales to the Alamo to reinforce it after the siege had already begun. They snuck past the Mexican outer defenses and were able to make it into the fort. Fort, quote unquote. Of course, we all know what happened at the Alamo, but the Alamo is a very important battle, as with the news of the fall of the Alamo, and the massacre that happened afterwards, same with the massacre at Goliad, this spread throughout Texas, and instead of discouraging the Texian soldiers like Santa Anna thought it would, it actually encouraged them to continue the fight, and is really what led to the massacre that happened at San Jacinto. The men only gave one volley, and then they rushed in at the Mexican forces. The bitterness and anger they felt, and the sense of revenge they sought for their fallen brethren, overtook them, and instead of obeying the orders of their officers and their commanding general, Sam Houston, they charged at the Mexicans. And that honestly probably was one of the factors that actually allowed San Jacinto to be such the great victory that it was. Now, enough for history. Let's look at what I'm wearing. As you can see, this is basic civilian clothing at the time with civilian equipment. There could also be military equipment. I've talked about this in past videos, and especially a lot of American volunteers who probably had a little more money. They could go to stores, general stores, and buy surplus equipment, muskets, and other such items, and they would bring that to go and fight as well. They also would use that for their basic militia duties in the United States as well. But a lot of them were just coming in civilian clothes with civilian weapons. I did decide to not wear the canteen, as this is really actually how they would have looked during the battle. So when you have your full equipment, you have what's called garrison kit and marching kit. And even there's actually a third one, which is battle kit. Battle kit is essentially what you need for a battle. So your way of carrying ammunition, your canteen, and your bayonet. With your belt, sometimes the haversacks were kept. A lot of times they were just ditching. If they were going from a march directly into battle, they would ditch the knapsacks and go in like that. Otherwise, they would take the haversacks off as well. Marching duty, of course, would be the full knapsack, haversack, all the things. And then garrison duty is when specifically for people on fort duty. That would be literally just your way of carrying ammunition and your bayonet and or knife in this case. So I have my belt, I have my knife, I've got my shot bag, which carries all of my ammunition. Got my rifle, of course, and then I'm wearing my beautiful white suit of clothing. Also, one thing to mention, people in my class that I represent, most of the time, probably wouldn't be matching like this. These actually aren't the same white. They're technically the same, and the camera, they look the same. But it did happen occasionally, especially with common colors like white, since they were so cheap. But typically, as a poor person, you're just buying enough fabric for one garment at a time. So that's why you usually didn't see matching clothes. Also, matching was seen as something that the wealthy did, the upper middle class and upper class did. Which, with the Texas Revolution, you had men of all classes fighting, even men in the middle class and upper class fighting with infantrymen, and not always as officers. As officers were elected rather than commissioned. So, yeah, this is the basic militia kit. I've got my top hat and all that. I do have my my roundabout unbuttoned, so that was actually fairly common. You would see the roundabout unbuttoned rather than fully buttoned, but also men would wear it fully buttoned. You also see in the Civil War and other wars where the coats would not be fully buttoned, just buttoned at the top, or in this case, held in by just not buttoned in general. So yeah. Anyways, that's about it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.